I'm Robarge, a relationship coach and a psychotherapist. Welcome to the New Love Addiction, where we're not talking about addiction, we're talking about attachment injuries and healing attachment trauma. On this video, let's talk about emotional unavailability as it relates to delayed responding. So we're talking about a response, having someone respond with a delayed reaction. So this example that I'm giving, it's very subtle. We are breaking down very specific behaviors. We could say, the big picture, the big theme that we're looking at is what is emotional unavailability? How does a person continue to practice ways to reinforce staying disconnected, staying distant, staying avoidant, and withholding emotional warmth, emotional connection towards another person. Now, oftentimes, if you're on the receiving end of this is incredibly confusing and it's crazy making, especially if these behaviors are not absolute. The behaviors, sometimes the person is emotionally available, sometimes they're not. That, in fact, is what we would recall an ambivalent attachment. And an ambivalent attachment is come here, stay there, don't get closer, come here, back off, and we're doing this at the same time, and it creates very much internally for the person who's doing it. They themselves are confused, but also if you're on the receiving end, you're getting a lot of mixed messages. So the very specific delayed responding is a subtle observation that at times reinforces how a person stays in control of keeping another person emotionally distant. Let me give you an example. Delayed responding is just that. There is a delay in a response. So if we're looking at interpersonal relating, we're looking in the moment, we're having a conversation, we're talking. Let's say you live with a partner, let's say, a partner, and again, it could be family member, could be, parent, could be anyone in extended family, but also the intimate relationship you have with a partner, a significant other, your spouse. Let's say either you're just dating, you don't live together, you're dating, you're in the same space, or maybe you do live together, it doesn't matter. But you're on the couch, you're watching TV, and you would initiate a question. And there's not a response right away. You ask the question, hey, honey, was remembering when we were in the car and you were talking about your sister, I think that would be nice if you went ahead and bought her a gift. Oh, yeah, okay. I'll think about getting her a gift. So you could tell, obviously I'm exaggerating it in this moment, and maybe my example that I gave is not the best example because it's something rather benign when it comes to that example of buying your sister a gift. But if you, in that moment, initiate a question and you're calling out to your partner, and there's this almost bizarre, weird delay in responding, it leaves you hanging. Now, let me repeat what I already said. I'm really getting very specific, very nitty-gritty here. So this does not mean that every time someone is absent-minded, every time someone is distracted, and that they don't respond to the rhythm of conversation in an appropriate way, that doesn't mean that they're emotionally withholding. But we are looking at the frequency, and we're looking at the pattern, and how often does this happen? And if you find yourself asking a question of someone, beginning a conversation is an initiation. And it's like, throwing them a volleyball and saying, hey, do you want to play volleyball? And the way conversation works is you usually don't get the approval or permission first. You just go ahead and serve the volleyball and say, hey, heads up, a volleyball is coming your way. It's an invitation to play volleyball. It's an invitation to participate in this back and forth of conversation. And usually there is a rhythm. There is a reasonable rhythm. Let's use acting as an example. Let's use the theater as an example. One way that you know theater is really good, one way that you know an ensemble cast is working together, you have these actors on stage and they have lines and they have blocking and they're moving around the stage. The reason why it works, when it really works, is they're in a rhythm and they are responding back and forth to this flow of the rhythm. And there's somewhat of a cultural, the rhythm is defined and reinforced by what is culturally acceptable. It has imagine music, imagine a song. It keeps a tempo. And you can sing along with the song, you can participate with the song because you join the tempo. Well, interpersonal relating and conversation is the exact same thing. There is a tempo and there is a rhythm. One reason why people don't get along and one reason why we find ourselves conflicting or find a sense of dissonance with a friend or a potential new friend is we realize that we're keeping different tempos. And you can feel it in your body. It's sort of like, I communicate at this speed. And then you have another friend who, it's either, really communicates at this speed, or you have another friend who is much slower, and it's those gaps between your style, your speed, and his or her speed, and you're noticing, we keep missing each other. There's nothing more obvious of this when it has to do with humor. One reason why humor works, it's all about timing. The phrase is it's all about timing. And so there's a rhythm to telling a joke. There's a rhythm to being humorous. And if we miss the window of opportunity, I'm sure you know what it's like where someone, they missed the window of opportunity, they delayed a little too long saying the funny thing, but then they blurt it out after the fact. They try to tag it on at the end of a moment, and it just feels awkward. It just feels like, well, you really missed the boat on that. So we're looking at interpersonal relationship as a rhythm that has a tempo, and we participate, we join in the mirroring and matching the tempo that's being presented. So if someone is very fast and someone's very excited about something, we usually join them and we start talking fast as well. Oh, what's going on? Oh my gosh, what's happening? Tell me more, tell me more. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Really? You gotta really be... And if someone comes to it slowly, they're very pensive, they're very intentional about what they're sharing, you're going to notice that the rhythm slows down. And so your response will be equally thoughtful. You'd take a pause before you would jump in and offer a response. When you are with someone who is emotionally unavailable, who is engaging in behaviors to withhold and to deny connection, they are going to, again, consciously, subconsciously, we don't know to what degree that they're actually doing this from a manipulative standpoint, but they have a series of behaviors and these styles that will just continue to push a person away. One way to push someone away and to get them to shut up and to stop engaging, stop talking, is to be delayed in the response. Another example is if you're talking to someone and they're reading, and there's a moment where you would interrupt them, and let's say it's a Sunday afternoon, you're lounging around the house, and the person's reading the paper. Now, of course, you're interrupting the reading, so it makes sense that there's going to be a delayed, or the person might be a bit irritated that you just interrupted. However, again, based upon this video, I'm really getting very microscopic. We're getting out the flashlight and we're really looking at these behaviors. So in that example, of course, there could be a delay because the person is being interrupted and they're not really paying attention to you. And why should they? Because they're reading the New York Times. But sometimes there's going to be the acceptable, I want to use the word normal, but I don't mean normal. It's going to be that moment of the understandable, the acceptable, understandable delay in responding. But then if a person is trying to also maintain an emotional disconnect and to maintain being emotionally distant, you'll notice the understandable, reasonable experience of delay because you're the one that interrupted that person reading the newspaper. But it's almost like a game, and the person will feign or pretend to not hear you and will continue reading the paper as if you never said anything. Now, obviously, what I'm describing, this is outright being ignored. Now you're being ignored, but it's being done through the sort of hiding behind or assuming that the delayed response makes sense because they're so engrossed in the New York Times. They're so engrossed in what they're doing. Now, let me repeat. I've already said this. It doesn't mean that every time someone is engrossed in the New York Times that they're ignoring you. If you think that it does mean that, then your level of sensitivity and your looking, your manufacturing ways to feel rejected and ignored might be something you need to think about, and how you have a hypersensitivity that is blowing out of proportion these moments. So we're not saying that every time this happens that a person is emotionally unavailable and is out to reject you and ignore you. However, I am inviting you. What I am saying is pay attention to the pattern. And if you notice this goes on multiple times, how would you counter that? It would mean that, how is it not a pattern? It means that when you do interrupt with the New York Times, the person is quickly responsive and says, oh yeah, and they're able to respond to your request or respond to your question. And then they might even very consciously say, honey, I love you, honey, but sometimes when you interrupt when I'm reading the paper, it's really irritating and I get distracted. So I think I'm just going to I'm going to go in the living room and read the paper for 30 minutes. And why don't we talk a little bit later? So in that sense, it's perfectly reasonable. Of course, a person doesn't want to be interrupted that way. But for the sake of this video and looking at behaviors of emotional unavailability, we're talking about a delayed response. Let me give you one other example. Let's say you are going somewhere, or let's say you're at home and you're going to play a family game. The idea is to say, let's play cards. We love this one card game. That's our thing. We like to play cards. Let's play cards. Or again, let's say you're getting ready to go somewhere and people are getting ready and doing their hair and getting dressed. And there's going to be a point at which it's going to feel like everybody's ready. And it's time to go. It's time to acknowledge that we are going together, that we're ready to go. Back to the example, let's say it's a card game. You've been waiting for 30 minutes while the person prepares whatever he or she's preparing. It's time to stop doing what you're doing and come into the card game. If you're noticing, if you're with someone who's emotionally avoidant and staying emotionally withdrawn, a form of delayed response is to keep you waiting. And before that person will join you in the card game, he or she will decide to complete 3 additional tasks. He or she will decide to work on some project. Like, well, I just have to answer email right now. I just have to look at my text messages. I have to take out the trash. I need to run into the garage and put some of, I'm filling up something in the refrigerator in the garage. I'll be right back. Oh, by the way, the laundry in the dryer just finished. Let me take the items out of the dryer, and I just want to fold them up real quickly and put them in the bedroom. And this can go on. And if you realize that this is a pattern, and over time, you're sitting at the table by yourself with the stack of cards. The whole idea was saying, we're going to play cards. And you're noticing that you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting. And there's always like one more thing that appears to be more important than interacting with you. And in this example, joining you for a fun card game. If this is a pattern that you notice over time, it begins to send the message that I really don't want to spend time with you. And that, in fact, doing all these other things are more important than connecting with you. If you notice this repeatedly over time, you might begin to look at and to consider that the partner you're with is practicing these very subtle ways of keeping themselves emotionally unavailable. Not that a card game is so... of course, a card game does not have to be so emotionally vulnerable. I mean, it's just a card game. But oftentimes, for someone who wants to avoid any type of emotional connection, they're going to even avoid these very playful, neutral moments as well, because they don't want to anticipate in the middle of playing cards, you change the subject and say, hey, honey, I want to talk to you about, our finances, and I'm feeling very scared and very worried. And in that process, you're creating an invitation to say, let's talk about something that has some emotional charge around it, because we're emotionally charged about our money and our finances. And if the person wants to avoid these moments of needing to be emotionally vulnerable, and this example would have to do, talking about money, one way that he or she can sort of control or guarantee that we're not even going to get into that situation is to maintain this delayed responding and this delayed engagement. And in the examples that I gave, it will feel like you're waiting. You're just waiting. Like, okay, well, when are we going to play the game? I mean, I thought we agree, and now you're doing this. And so, again, these are all very, very subtle ways, and we're not just looking at it happening once or twice. We're looking at this happening chronically over a period of time and realizing, wow, this person I'm with is not even engaging with it. I mean, they're not taking the initiative to want to sit down, because in that moment, it has nothing to do with playing a game of cards. It's not about the activity. It's about saying, I want to be with you. And we're doing this through the shared experience of playing a card game. But what we're actually reinforcing is saying, I just want to spend time with you, and I want us to be able to do something together. And if you're with a partner who seems to be delaying the response, delaying their coming into joining you, over time, your nervous system is going to feel this. Your nervous system is going to activate, and you'll say to yourself, well, I feel like he doesn't even want to spend time with me, or I feel like she's avoiding me. It seems like she spends more time with the laundry than she actually does sitting at the table playing this game. I hope that this was helpful. beginning to look at these very specific dynamics and break them down into examples of how we identify them. If you like this video and want to see more just like it, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, you can join a Facebook group of the same name, The New Love Addiction, if you want to chat with other like-minded people exploring this and other ideas about relationship dynamics and about attachment injuries. And then lastly, if you want to learn more about me, please do by going to my website, alanrobarge.com. I hope that this was helpful, and thank you for watching.